Hi, I'm Debbie Georgatos. Welcome to my show, America, Can We Talk? Today, we're going to talk about, yes, leftists do mock prayer while conservatives work. Rich Higgins, former top National Security Council official, political warfare expert, and we're going to talk with him about coronavirus and more. And finally, leftists lie and politicize our crisis. And I'll tell you why these stories matter to you. Stay tuned.
I am America. One voice, united we stand.
Debbie Georgatos, host of America Can We Talk, is an author, attorney, and political analyst whose mission is to inspire the American political conversation about preserving liberty in the best country on earth. America Can We Talk is sponsored by GC Works, a Dallas-based company performing advanced technology research in the oil and gas industry.
And hello again, and welcome to America Can We Talk and to today's First Five. I'm Debbie Georgatos. I call this segment, this idea about leftist mock prayer. You may recall this past Sunday, President Trump had designated as a National Day of Prayer and urging all Americans to be especially prayerful in focusing on the coronavirus and our country's reaction and protection and safety and healing and all the great things that Christian Americans and people of all faiths understand that is part of your prayer, faith in God and trying to move all of us to be prayerfully protecting our country. I said at that point that leftists mock prayer, and I want to give you an example of that. So David Hogg, remember that guy? He was the high school student who happened to be involved in that horrific high school shooting. I mean, he was in the school, and he's become a left-wing hero. He's anti-Second Amendment, grab all the guns, very foul-mouthed, very vitriolic, pronouncing at age 17, pronouncing his knowledge of the rights of the American citizens relating to the Second Amendment and a whole bunch of other things. Just became a national phenom. And actually, I believe he's attending Harvard, although now he's home because of the coronavirus. But in any case, he became a national loudmouth figure against gun rights. And he, at that time, was mocking the idea that after any of these horrific shooting events, many Americans, including the president, will often say, we offer our thoughts and prayers, we're keeping you in our prayers, mocked prayer. And at that time, David Hogg had tweeted out F prayer related to the Second Amendment thing, take their guns away. And he had, in fact, and the gun violence epidemic, he had that tweet out, F prayer. So on this current coronavirus crisis. So again, coronavirus is the virus. COVID-19 is the disease that it's called when you have contracted that. So David Hogg tweeted out, "Don't let this administration address COVID-19 like our national gun violence epidemic. F National Day of Prayer. We need immediate, comprehensive action." Again, advice from a juvenile. He's a college student who is purporting to tell all of America that everything they're doing, that he knows the right answer is he's got this comprehensive action we should take with respect to guns and now with respect to the coronavirus. But he tweets this out about F the National Day of Prayer. So maybe you want to forgive him because he's only 19 or 20, whatever he is, and he's obviously had fame before he had intelligence, bless him. So he has national attention, he's got a big national following, enjoys saying, crass and just vile things. But the reason I wanted to share this story in today's First Five is that Rashida Tlaib, we talked about her before in the show. She is a Democrat member of Congress. She's a Muslim Democrat member of Congress. She retweeted. If you're not in the Twitter world, people put tweets out. They say what they ever want to say. And if you like it, you can like someone's tweet and you can retweet it. And you may think, okay, so it was a casual, so she retweeted this, so what? No, you have to understand this lady's mindset. First of all, she's a member of Congress. She knows all sorts of groups in this country, groups that support her, groups that do not like her. Follow her every word, watch what she's doing, follow her tweets. It's a very conscious decision for her to retweet an ugly thing like that coming from another angry leftist, David Hogg, and to retweet it is a signal from her, this is what I think. I'm with this idea. F the National Day of Prayer, retweeted by a Democrat member of Congress. Contrast that with the words out of President Trump's mouth. He has, again, we've been talking about recently on the show, I think we talked about on Tuesday, President Trump has been out there saying, we're going to get through this. He's talking through with Americans all these reasonable steps we should be taking and how we're trying to take care of ourselves and prevent the spread of the coronavirus. He had a great little press conference the last couple of days in which he basically said, one day we'll be standing, possibly up here, and we'll say, well, we won. He's saying to America, we're going to beat this coronavirus thing. His attitude, we're going to say that. Sure, as you're sitting there, we're going to say that. We're going to say America won. I love that President Trump is signaling to the American people the idea, yes, we have a crisis, and we're grown-ups in this country. We have many crises. Countries, people have crises. We can handle this. We're going to win this. And President Trump saying that. And I thought it was just a really great, for today's First Five, just juxtaposition to the mindset of President Trump urging National Day of Prayer, urging people to take various steps that everyone understands you're supposed to be taking, and saying we're going to beat this, we're going to win, and urging America to pray about it, as we have done. We talked about the other day in the show the great historical figures in America. We have the sublime, I believe it was Ronald Reagan referred to George Washington as one of the most sublime images in American history, was George Washington on his knees praying at Valley Forge. We have then Abraham Lincoln many times talking during the Civil War about the need to be on God's side, not trying to ask, is God on our side, but America has to be on God's side. We have many profound statements by President Reagan about our country's need for prayer, many profound needs were expressed by FDR, just urging America to turn to prayer as we launched into World War II. And we have President Trump urging National Day of Prayer. And we have leftists who are pretty much rooted in atheism mocking the National Day of Prayer. I'd rather be on the side of those who support prayer in this country. And that, my friends, is today's First Five. I said before the show started, we have a special guest joining us. I believe he's joining us by phone, so I will just share you a little bit about him. He's joined us in the past on this show. I think not since 2017. I look back in my voluminous records about the show. I think it was 2017. But Rich Higgins is a former member of the National Security Council. One way he describes himself, and I love this terminology, political warfare strategy. He is someone who thinks about how ideas are fought as political warfare, and we're going to talk about that in the context of the coronavirus. He's an expert on the nexus between theological doctrines and information age unconventional warfare. Spent 20 years combating terrorism on behalf of our country. From 2011 to 2013, he managed a classified project for Special Operations Command. From 2010 to 2011, he served as a chair of Special Operations and Low Intensity Conflict at the National Defense University. He formed the Department of Defense's Irregular Warfare Support Program Office. This is a guy who thinks deeply about many things. Actually, you'll soon discover many things, but thinks deeply about warfare and the warfare of ideas and political warfare in our country. Formerly served in the National Security Council, and joining us today to talk about where we are in our battle in America with the coronavirus. So I believe we have Rich Higgins on the line.
Hi, Debbie. How are you?
I am well, and I'm happy to hear your voice. Very well. How are you doing?
I'm great. Looking forward to talking to you again. It's been a while.
It has, yeah. Lots happening in America. Well, we communicated before the show started, and I have probably more topics than time, but I want to jump right in and I want to talk to you about the way the left in this country is talking about the coronavirus, and the way they're talking about the president, the way they're talking about the president's handling of the coronavirus. Do you sense that the left is using the coronavirus crisis as an aspect of political, or are they engaging in political warfare with respect to this crisis?
Yeah, I think they're going beyond just using it. I think there's a large segment of the Democratic Party and the hard left political operatives that are doing their best to create the crisis, or I should say, to create the sense of crisis. Right. And you see it, through the mainstream media. You see it with the selective reporting, taking quotes out of context from presidential briefings, and so on and so forth. So, we've become used to it. We've seen now 3 years of this, incessant lying and deception coming from them, and the real issue here is that it's so destabilized our sense of trust in the information that we receive, that we're receiving, that we have a hard time knowing if our reaction is even appropriate, given the information sources that we're forced to consume via the mass media. And that's one of the things that I think concerns me the most about this, is that there's this sense of almost who to trust, right? And the left has done a very effective job of kind of dislodging us from any sort of sense of community reality due to their just incessant lying. And now, here we are, dealing with this virus, and so many of us are left to question the information that we're being provided, and myself included.
Oh, yeah. So let's just start with the coronavirus coming to us from China. We had for some period of time, China not acknowledging to the world what was happening. In fact, denying, there was one doctor who in China who was trying to say, hey, we got a really big problem here, a really big problem, and we need to be testing, we need to be getting the word out, and China really suppressed it. Do you have the sense that China, I don't know, we didn't even talk about this topic today, but are you concerned about whether China was deliberately endangering America or American citizens by failing to be forthcoming about the coronavirus?
Anytime you're dealing with China, I think you have to recognize that I don't look at China as a monolith. I see the Chinese people are under the yoke of the Chinese Communist Party. So in the country of 1 billion people, I think the Chinese Communist Party includes about 90 million party members. And it's those 90 million party members and their stranglehold on political power that forces them into making decisions that all communist regimes do, which is, to hide state secrets, to constantly protect the party. And so there's an element of, the normal decision-making process that you would see in a communist regime, which would be to hide, something that would stain the regime. And then the other question is, and again, it goes to the ongoing battle between the Trump administration and the intelligence community. What did we know? When did we know it? Should we have known it? Whether or not the Chinese were telling us. And if the initial pathogen was released in late October or early November, as we're beginning to hear, it had been out for a while before we even began to get inklings of what was happening. That gave the viral pneumonia time to get a foothold and to really expand to a level it wouldn't. We can even look right now. The Chinese are still allowing their citizens to travel out and about around the world, knowing full well they have this pandemic crisis. So, I think we've seen for many years in the national security community the quote unquote deep state perspective of China was the panda, right? The panda bear. And in reality, we're dealing with something a little bit more vicious, right? It's really the red dragon in the Chinese Communist Party that we should have been concerned about all along. And so, what the president is dealing with is 30 years of national security decision making that really, just took the entire national security deliberate decision making process and pushed it aside in favor of this commercial engagement strategy. And the thing that I derive most from this entire series of events is that President Trump's foreign policy positions vis-a-vis China have been completely validated by this series of events, whereas he was one of the first to express some real doubt about the way we were dealing with the Chinese communists. And it'll be interesting to see over the next couple weeks how this actually unfolds from a geopolitical perspective, never mind the domestic security biological pathogen threat side of things. Just the geopolitical aspects and the geopolitical economic aspects of this are really going to be something to watch.
Okay, I'm taking notes while you're talking because I have been reading so much about this virus, and there are about 25 directions we can go right now, but I want to ask you to embellish what you were just saying a moment ago about the geopolitical perspective. And what kinds of things should we be watching, or what kind of things would you anticipate could be occurring in the next few weeks that you say are the geopolitical or geopolitical economic impact of this virus? Can you explain more?
Well, I'll start with the classic steps that I think we should be looking for we need to go back and revisit the data from October, November, December, January, and see what we know in terms of the deliberate decision-making process that the Chinese followed. We have to assume, again, this is from an intelligence and strategy perspective, we always have to assume that the most dangerous course of action is the course of action that we're dealing with. That would be an intentional release of the pathogen. Okay. The most likely course of action would have been that it had an accidental release. And then whether it was the most dangerous, the intentional, or the most likely, the accidental, the follow-on decisions made by the Chinese Communist Party, subsequent to the actual release. So as you start working out your way through these, through that decision matrix, that's gonna force us into recognizing this is a national security imperative. You're going to see nation-state level decisions being made, not just related to the decision as to whether or not we perhaps hold China financially accountable or what have you, but possibly moving towards the decoupling of our entire political economy from China, right? And we'll probably end up somewhere in the middle where we won't entirely displace from the Chinese Communist Party, but we'll begin to move and transition back our entire defense industrial base, our microchip manufacturing. We're hearing a lot about medicines and chemicals that we're dependent upon from China. These are going to be huge political economy decisions. Geopolitically, we're going to have to revisit China's role in these international bodies, for example, the World Health Organization, the United Nations. I mean, if we can find or deduce that there was an intent to allow this, this viral pneumonia to go out and infect the other countries of the world, that's going to cause a lot of their ongoing international efforts. Their One Belt, One Road, their China 2049 strategy, the Southeast Asia Development Bank. All of these big efforts that the Chinese government has had underway are going to have to be looked at again closely.
Those are all such brilliant points, and honestly, I don't see a lot of people talking about those kind of that strategic thinking you're describing. I don't see a lot of that happening in the conversation. We seem so today politically, we seem so caught up in the concern about the virus, how it's spreading, how we're protecting people, a lot of just unnecessary, relentless finger pointing, and much of it falsely claiming things that were done incorrectly. But this is, I'm very glad you mentioned all of that, because really the long-term impact, if we discover, as you say, whether China intentionally released, which would be obviously horrific, or accidentally released, but then decided to be quiet for some period of time, there really should be major ramifications geopolitically, worldwide. I mean, their involvement in the World Health Organization, in the UN, any of these organizations, there ought to be a major rebuke by the world. And, honestly, I've often thought back to China, and you mentioned the percentage of people who are part of the party versus the entire country. The people of China, the citizens are, they are subjects worse than we were subjects to King George. They are just they are not they have no power, and they have no way to get power in China, but to have the world start to push back on that government could really change dynamics inside China. You think that's accurate?
I think that is accurate. I don't think you can overstate I'll say this: China is the most totalitarian, fascist police state that has ever existed. They monitor your communications. They monitor the things you say. They monitor the things your children say. They track you 24/7. There is no privacy. There's none of that. And I think when we were making our deals with them, particularly following China's entry into the World Trade Organization circa 2000, 2001, we just kind of looked past that, right? We saw a large source of relatively low-cost labor that could help some of our corporations, and the political and ideological consequences of partnering and empowering them were just glossed over very hastily. And now people like President Trump, who spoke out against that, people who maybe questioned that decision-making, they've been shown to have been correct, I believe. Now, that said, I don't want to jump to conclusions, right? I want to make sure the audience understands that. I'm not jumping to conclusions saying China did or didn't do this intentionally, but we have to start with that assumption and then move from there. And where along the way did they go off the rails, if you will? The thing that really sticks out to me, though, Debbie, is even today, here we are now, for them anyways, almost 4 or 5 months into this, they are still sending Chinese citizens out into the world, and they are arriving even today. I mean, I can't see any decision making that would ever justify that. I can't imagine us doing that if we had the viral pneumonia outbreak. So it's just all these different things kind of come to fruition. And we're seeing now, it's the classic though. We'll know them by their fruits. Well, here we are. I think from just a purely from a curiosity standpoint, there really isn't a precedent for this in terms of the way that our media has reacted to this, where we see our media picking up and parroting Chinese Communist Party talking points. Across the board, at CNN and the Washington Post and others. And that is the thing that I think bothers me the most, is that our sense of perception right now is just so thrown off that we're uncertain about everything that's happening, and then to have the government taking these, particularly at the state level, taking these draconian steps of locking down entire cities for weeks, and with really no thought being given. I really don't hear any discussion taking place at the national level about the long-term precedent being set for what to this point anyways is killed a relatively small number of people in terms of diseases when you look at it in context. Now that's not to say the breakout, if you will, won't get worse here. It will before it gets better. But at the same time, I just, is the next time we have an avian flu or a seasonal flu that comes through, and it's 3 or 4 times worse than a normal flu, and it takes 80,000 or 100,000 people in that year. Are we going to be locking down cities and counties again? I mean, there are precedents being set here that are really frightening to me, that are hyper empowering states. And state and local governments, as well as the federal government, to a level that this country's never seen outside of a major war. The Civil War, World War II, perhaps, and we're now doing this for a virus that hasn't, at this point, hasn't really killed that many people on a relative scale.
Rich Higgins, I am so glad you said that. This is a discussion I have with many of my friends, both on air and off air. Concern about there seems to be a sense of surrender on the part of many American people to the idea that the government is going to, we're here in Dallas. Restaurants and bars are closed. You can get drive-through food. Grocery stores are opened. There is not a shutdown every single business, but businesses are closing down. And I fear that it's a combination of there has been so much sensational reporting about this coronavirus, the disease or and the spread of it and how quickly it spreads, and alarm even and very little reporting about all the people who have recovered from coronavirus. You have whatever the last numbers we reported, like it was 75,000 people worldwide have recovered out of 150 or something like that of diagnosed cases, meaning we don't get any of the good news. And so you have people worried, and then you have the government taking, as you're saying, draconian steps for private businesses. It's one thing for the government to shut down public schools because that's their deal. I guess they're paying for them. But private business and Americans submitting without really much challenge at all. And then you do wonder, I could not agree more, the precedent being set is so alarming. You talk about a country where we're allegedly based on freedom, and yet we're just surrendering very quickly to a growing government, unaccountable and untethered and no input from the people. We're shutting this down. And there's a little bit too much submission, a sense of submission on the part of the people. I'm so glad you said that. Actually, I don't know what we could do about it, but it does seem like in America, there will be ultimately some people saying, wait a minute, I'm not going along with this. And I'm kind of hoping that happens, a little bit of pushback against these draconian measures.
Yeah. Look, I mean, I'm sitting and I'm watching the deliberate decision-making process play out, and I recognize that there's this sense of, we need to move quickly in order to get ahead of this. But at some point, you run the risk of an overreaction. I'm not advocating do nothing, but when you have mayors and governors ordering, the stop of all weapons and ammunition sales, the shutting down of private businesses, these massive spending bills, pouring through Congress that are going to, they're all debt financed. We really need to take a deep breath here. And I say this as somebody who has relative skin in the game. I mean, my wife works at the hospital. My sister's the director of nursing at a major hospital in Boston and is dealing with this stuff. My family's in the fight. I recognize that the viral pneumonia is real. But I also recognize that every year, thousands and tens of thousands of people die from very similar diseases. And what I worry about is that the reaction to this now on the tail end of what we've experienced for the past 3 years with the perpetual media lying machine, the Democrats' impeachment, the fiasco, just the constant effort to shut down the American nationalist movement. To have this happening now is just very frightening. And it leads me to question, what are the political motives behind some of the people that are orchestrating this? And then, like I said, it all goes back to that deliberate decision-making process made by the communist Chinese. I've spent enough time thinking about this and discussing it within small, closed circles. But the thing I find most frightening is this willing participation by almost every single member of the Republican Party to go forward on this without even giving voice or caution to the steps being taken. And that is. There is no debate happening. The debate is about, how big the aid package will be. Is it going to be $2 billion or $1.5 billion? That's the debate. There's no debate about the long-term consequences of the decisions that they're making.
Also, you mentioned the firearms. That was one of my articles I had in front of me to ask you about New Orleans, and I think there was another city as well, but New Orleans, the mayor announced a coronavirus order allowing the ban on sale and transportation of firearms. Tell me, you're an expert in a lot of things here, Rich Higgins. What is the logical connection between between coronavirus and a mayor saying she's going to issue a ban on the sale and transportation of firearms, which I'm pretty sure is a Second Amendment problem? I'm very serious. What is the connection, if any?
There is no connection. They have at this point allowed the the nightmare of every liberty-loving American, which is the empowerment of the tyrannical local bureaucrat, right? And that's effectively what you see happening. And they're going to package it up, and they always do, as we're doing it for your safety, we're doing it for your well-being. But I thought that one of the most telling things I saw in the past week or so was Mayor de Blasio, who shuts down the gyms and the restaurants and the bars and the malls, and then the very next morning after doing that, he goes to the gym himself.
I cannot.
And they film him going to the gym.
Yep. You know what? I'm kicking
And
myself.
they
Go
ask,
ahead. Go.
They film him going to the gym, and they ask him in a press conference, "Well, why were you there?" He's, "Well, I didn't think that, it doesn't really apply to me. It only applies to you, because I have to stay healthy to run the city." I mean, it was classic dictator speak, right? Rules for you, but not for me. And that's what I see going on across the board.
I'm sorry we talked over each other a little bit there, but I meant to grab that clip because it is the most amazing thing. De Blasio's had a lot of stuff out there, that Mayor de Blasio of New York City, a lot of stuff that sounds like he's really pretty into concern about the coronavirus and really demanding that the federal government better just take charge of this and take charge of the chain of command, the chain of supply, and take charge of everything. And he issued all this, all these things shut down. But he shows up at the gym himself. It is, dictator speak is a great term you just used, but the concept of all these protections for the helpless people who just need to be told what they can and can't do, but not for we the ruling class. I think that should alarm a lot of Americans. And even the shutting down of gyms, I have to say, same thing with bars and restaurants. Let the business owners decide. Let the individual citizens decide. If I were in the age group of concern or had pre-existing health conditions, I might decide to stay home. But this whole idea of surrendering your right to decide to participate in private, it's your right to assembly, it's the right of commerce in this country, shut down with barely a whimper out of the private sector. Very, very alarming. And
look, I've never seen anything like it in my life, and this is right out of Venezuela. It's bad.
It is. Well, all right, Rich Higgins. First of all, I wouldn't even talk about. I do want to. Well, we're almost out of time. I know. I want to hit one quick thing. You said a long time ago, at the beginning of our interview, you talked about the ongoing tension or battle between President Trump and the members of the national security community. And I know that you were on the National Security Council. He's cleaned out a bunch of people recently. Let numbers of people go because the National Security Council gotten so large and unwieldy and frankly disloyal to him. Do you sense the National Security Council or the national security, largely speaking in America, the intelligence community, are they on track with President Trump, or is there still some tension there where you're concerned about whether they are working together well?
I think the new National Security Advisor has done a very good job at cleaning up the White House. I think that there are still residual I'll call it residual factionalism inside the national security community, and we're reaching a point where the tension there is coming to a level where it's kind of normal, right? Where you may have policy disagreements or prescriptive course of action that aren't aligned. And that those internal policy fights can happen. That's okay. I'm comfortable with that. I'm not seeing the same seditious, subversive behavior that we were seeing in the past, though. So that's a good thing.
That is
credit to President Trump for acting, and credit to Robert O'Brien for helping him to clean it up.
Well, I'm glad to hear that answer. Rich Higgins, first of all, it's great to talk with you again, and thank you so much for making time to talk to me today, and really for all of your insights. I appreciate it so much. Thanks so much.
All right, Debbie, take care.
Take care. I got to tell you, folks, that is one very smart guy. We had him on the show in 2017. He's actually, we've met him. He's been to our home a few times in Dallas. He's as you can tell from the way he speaks, a very deep thinker, a very earnest thinker, a very conscientious person, and very well-educated, immersed in kind of deep analysis of where we are as a country. So anyway, gratefully could join us and talk about all those issues and talk about the national security crisis aspect of the coronavirus. Rich Higgins, just a great guest. Okay, I want to tell you, I captioned this, the leftist lie and politicize the crisis. In the time that since the coronavirus has become known to everyone in America, some lies, some statements get repeated over and over and over. They get said by someone in the left-wing media, repeated without question, repeated, and then of course on social media, where people are happy to repeat lies and make zero effort. I see these postings on Facebook and other social media sources very authoritatively, well, we wouldn't be here and we wouldn't be in this terrible situation with the coronavirus if only Trump did this and not that, if only Trump hadn't done this. Look what he did this. And I want to, there are several just profound, flat out lies I want to tell you, because sometimes the people repeating them are innocent. They actually read something in left-wing media and thought it was true. And so, but when they repeat it, they spread this virus of fear, of panic, of blame, of finger pointing that has no justification at all in truth. First one I want to point out. There were many references in left-wing media around this country to the argument that the reason we are having such a hard time with the coronavirus is because the White House dissolved an entity that was the Pandemic Response Office, that because Trump dissolve was the word being used, the Pandemic Response Office, that somehow, this is why we're in the terrible condition we are in. And there was a great piece in the Washington Post. In fact, it's on our website. You can go to americacanwetalk.org on the homepage under shows, drop down list of links and read this. This is in the Washington Post. It probably kills them to have to acknowledge this. The White House did not dissolve the Pandemic Response Office. One of the lies the left spreads to attack President Trump. This is a piece written by Tim Morrison, who is a senior fellow at the Hudson Institute and a former senior director for counterproliferation and biodefense on the National Security Council. He was there. He says, as we were just hearing again with Rich Higgins a moment ago talking to him, yes, the Trump administration did see fit to shrink the size of the National Security Council. The National Security Council had ballooned up in size under President Obama to what many felt was unwieldy, too large, too just clumsy to work with, unnecessarily bloating up. Even the Post itself reported in 2015, from the Clinton administration to the Obama administration's second term, the National Security Council staff had quadrupled in size to nearly 400 people. Nearly 400, quadrupled in size under Obama as compared to Clinton. So Trump began streamlining the National Security Council, which was an effort to make them more responsive, more agile, more able to work together. One of the moves inside the National Security Council was to create the Counterproliferation and Biodefense Directorate, which was the result, this is the key part, which was the result of consolidating 3 directorates into one. So the national, and part of this, reducing the bloated National Security Council, bloating up under Obama by the Trump team, was to consolidate 3 different directorates into one, because there was great overlap in the job description, so to speak, for these 3 different directorates. So they had the consolidation of 3 directorates into one, given the obvious overlap between arms control and proliferation and non-proliferation, weapons of mass destruction, terrorism, and global health and biodefense. So 3 overlapping directorates inside National Security Council collapsed into one. No areas of responsibility dropped. No dropping of the idea that we have to be prepared for biodefense. It is this reorganization that critics are lying to the American people about when they say President Trump dissolved the Pandemic Response Office. That did not happen. And so when you read things your friends post on social media or in emails or in announcements or in speeches, understand if candidates for president, such as we're down to Bernie and Biden on the American left, if you hear them say these things, you have to recognize they are trying to manipulate you. They are lying to you in order to manipulate you so that you will blame President Trump for something that actually started in China. That is one lie the left has perpetuated in order to attack President Trump. Second lie the left has proliferated in order to attack President Trump and unfairly blame him on the coronavirus. And this is something Joe Biden, he who would be president, if you only remember what year it is and what day it is, but Joe Biden in the Sunday night debate lied again to the American people about the coronavirus. He does this to attack President Trump. Biden said in the Sunday night debate, the World Health Organization offered the testing kits that they had available and to give it to us now. We refused that. We refused it. We didn't want to buy them. This is what Biden said. This is a lie. The facts are his claim that happened are false on many fronts. First of all, in a March press briefing, Secretary of Health and Human Services Alex Azar, along with the Food and Drug Administration FDA Commissioner Stephen Hahn, made clear, this is the key part, that there were no World Health Organization testing kits. There were none. This is what Biden said there were. He said there were, but we were too smug or arrogant, so we wouldn't accept them. But both the officials who actually know say no, there were no testing kits. He said, in fact, this is now Hahn, who is the Food and Drug Administration Commissioner, Stephen Hahn, told reporters, we've seen reports about a World Health Organization test, or they're using the WHO test, and the WHO is distributing a diagnostic test to countries. I want to be really clear about this. We've been in constant contact with WHO. The WHO does not have its own test that it is distributing globally. It has only posted on its website protocols, instructions, how to do things from some test developers, including our own CDC. So CDC is actually helping, our CDC is helping the World Health Organization by providing protocols that they are then announcing to the world are what you need to do to develop the coronavirus testing kits. And folks, I want to tell you again, if you didn't know that, what I just told you, that there were no World Health Organization testing kits, it's understandable that you wouldn't know that. You don't work for the U.S. government. You don't work for the World Health Organization. So you are likely to believe that, wow, I guess somehow we dropped the ball. We should have accepted their testing kits, and we would be in a terrible place if we only hadn't done that. But Joe Biden is in a position to understand the truth. Joe Biden does know. He knows that's not true. His team knows that's not true. The leadership of the Democrat Party knows that's not true. The leaders of the Democrat Party in the House and the Senate, the spokesman for the Democrat Party, candidates who are running for federal office in the Democrat Party, they all know this. They know it's a talking point that some left-wing whack job made up to attack President Trump, and then it became truth because it was a lie told enough, a lie told over and over and over and over, that people said, wow, I thought that was true. I assumed that was true. I mean, after all, I heard Joe Biden say it. Not true. And these are two of the key elements that Democrats who are trying to criticize President Trump's handling of this crisis put out there to the American people to lie to them, to cause you to hate the country, to hate the president, to think that the president is not competently handling this crisis. And it goes beyond just what I'm telling you. Biden saying this stuff, all about the World Health Organization having test kits that we turned down, and about how President Trump defunded the segment of the National Security Council that dealt with pandemic responses. These are just lies, but worse. They're designed to instill hatred of our country, hatred of our government, hatred of President Trump. They're designed to instill fear in the hearts and minds of the American people in the middle of a crisis. That is pure evil. It's not, they don't get a pass for this by saying, well, you know, it's political season, they're a candidate, you know, they get kind of fast and loose with the truth. No, this is pure evil on the part of Biden and other Democrats spreading those lies in order to spread to the American people the sense of fear about their government, fear about their country, fear about how we're going to handle this crisis. Pure, unadulterated evil. I'm going to close out this segment because we're about out of time here to say there's a piece posted on our website, americacanwetalk.org, and it's on the homepage under shows, drop down list of links. It's a guy who's just trying to make the point, and a point that I'm going to be talking about again more next week. But another aspect of our American response to the coronavirus is this. I get text messages and friends sending me emails with links to articles and, you know, emails from friends saying essentially something along the lines of, it's all over. We didn't move fast enough. It's too late to catch up. The coronavirus is going to be disastrous. We're going to lose hundreds of millions of Americans. Literally, we're going to lose between 100 and 150 million Americans to this virus. The left, the radical left, the Democrat media mob left is working to instill fear in the American people. Fear so that we will succumb to, we will submit to, we will surrender to whatever the leftist government tells us to do, whatever those in power tell us to do in terms of where we're allowed to go, what we're allowed to buy, who we're allowed to see, when we're allowed to be out together. The left is spreading fear on purpose. We'll find out exactly what happened with the virus and what happened with China. But our response in America, that you couldn't draw a clearer line between people trying to work to solve it, trying to develop test kits, trying to develop vaccines, trying to instill in the American people a sense of we're in this together, we can conquer this, we're going to do it, we're going to follow these protocols. Like President Trump keeps saying over and over, we're going to follow these protocols, we've got to do these things. Those people versus the people who are taking advantage of this crisis. They're not letting this crisis go to waste. So this one article I mentioned is a truly, it's just a very special article. A guy talking about the idea, he is called "We're All Going to Die," which you may not like that title too much, but he's making the point, and we'll talk about it because I really am out of time today, but I'm going to go back to this next week, talking about the idea that, of course, everyone living on the planet Earth today, whatever age you are, you're going to die. There is no, we're not going to live eternally. No one expects us. We understand there's mortal life. We understand we live our lives, most of us, with some sense of, I'm going to expect good in our life. I'm going to go out in the world today, and I may encounter someone who has a bad cold, and I'll try to stay clear of him if he's coughing, or her if she's sneezing. I may run into someone who has the flu. We undertake risks. We go out in life. We live life. We live it adventurously. We live it boldly. We don't live curled up in our little cocoon, hoping maybe if I just close my eyes and cover my head, nothing will happen to me. We have to get that idea back, even in the midst of this crisis. The left's generation of the crisis mentality, the fear, the intentional spreading of panic and fear is in itself an evil. And one of the ways to fight back against it, one of the ways to say no to it, is to be part of the at least willingness to challenge part of what the government is doing. Challenge when as Rich Higgins alluded to earlier, we're setting in place pretty severe protocols here. We're all going to just salute. We're all going to salute when the government says, okay, everybody stay home for a year. Okay, the economy is shot and no one can afford to do anything, so all of us have to turn to the government to give us money to live, to pay for our rent or our mortgage and our food and our everything else. it has tremendous potential to turn us into a nation of weak, subservient, dependent people unless we reassert that sense of America, that sense of people who understand we have a crisis to face. Yes, it's a serious crisis, and we can face it without giving in to the controlling influence the American left is trying to push, and without becoming helpless Americans waiting to be told by the government how we can live and where we can live and what we can do. We've got to have a spirit, a resurgence of the spirit of people who are not going to submit to every latest government directive about what can be open and how far we can go and what we can do, because you are surrendering our sense of liberty. I'll talk about this more next week, but I got to wrap up for today. So I'm going to turn and tell you why the stories we talked about today matter to you. So to start with, our first story from today, we had our story that relates to leftist mocking prayer. David Hogg and Rashida Tlaib earn an ugly footnote in American history. F, a day of prayer. This is what is meant by a mentality that replaces God with government. One ought to be able to be an atheist without being ugly, angry, and anti-American. But this is the reality. America has a Judeo-Christian foundation. America's rise is directly tied to the practice of its faith. See George Washington, Abraham Lincoln, FDR, Ronald Reagan. Hogg and Tlaib attitude leads to nothing good ever. The coronavirus silver lining may be America's rising up to this reality. On the leftist lie and politicize the crisis, the World Health Organization's anti-Trump spin on test kit dynamics is a lie. The World Health Organization was not handing out test kits, and America did not refuse to accept them. The Washington Post columnist arguing for Trump administration causing more GOP deaths than Democrats. I didn't even get to that one. A columnist was arguing that the virus will kill more Republicans. It's not even true. Read the article on our website, but it made her feel good to say that. A mainstream media story of Trump's irresponsible closing of the National Security Council, Office of Pandemic Response, a lie. Just an agreed upon consolidation of three functions into one in a bloated NSC. Leftist mainstream media behavior so off the rails and relentless. The smell of plot hoax is in the air. Doc Farmer, this is the guy who wrote the article I mentioned, is on our website, is an American hero. Read his post and see if it resonates with you. This coronavirus panic won't last if the American people won't let it last. Stay alert, clear and strong. America will get through this. And finally, we talked about on the show, and that is it, what we talked about today. So you know what? Sorry, folks. That's what we talked about today on America Can We Talk. If you want to communicate with me, email me at americacanwetalk@gmail.com. Love hearing from you. I love your comments on the Facebook page. I try to respond if I can. Love your comments on YouTube. Wherever you're listening, thank you for listening to America Can We Talk, where I always talk truth about America because America matters. I'll talk to you next time.
Can you hear us now?
America Can We Talk? Truth about America.
Can you hear